A couple weeks ago, finished up with brother's first trip to Egypt, and the fact that Joseph kept Simeon and all of the things we looked at. We stopped though at chapter 43, which is where we're going to pick up with. That's the second trip that they take. I will catch a coughing fit here in a second. I get to talk and just look over me. We'll get through it and I'll start talking again. But it's the second trip now, and we're going to see some more of the reluctance here of Jacob, not wanting to let Benjamin go back with the brothers. Of course, we've got to remember Jacob's predicament here is in his mind already lost Joseph, Simeon left behind, thinking who in the world, what may happen to him. Now, doesn't want to let his youngest son Benjamin go either. He's afraid of what may happen in a foreign land, foreign people he doesn't know. So we're going to see some of the reluctance of that to start off with here with Jacob. And as we go down, we'll read the first 7 verses here. The famine's gotten obviously very, very bad. Joseph knows this is coming. They prepared for this. It's all part of God's plan, essentially, to kind of bring Joseph kind of back, not in good graces, but kind of bring his story full circle, essentially, here. So let's read the first 7 verses of chapter 43, and we'll get into the second trip here. These brothers are going back to Egypt. And the famine was sore in the land. And it came to pass, when they had eaten of the corn, which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said unto them, Go again and buy us little food. And Judah spake unto him, saying, The man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. If thou wilt send our brother with us, we will go down and buy him food. But if thou wilt not send him, we will not go down and buy thee food. But if thou wilt not send him, we will not go down. For the man said unto us, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. And Israel said, Wherefore dealt ye so ill with me, as to tell the man whether ye had yet a brother? And they said, The man asked us straightly of our state and of our kindred, saying, Is your father yet alive? Have ye another brother? And we told him according to the tenor of these words, could we certainly know that we would say, Bring your brother down. So had Jacob here been free to choose, he's never going to send his sons to Egypt to start with, right? But he had been, especially not going to send them down there a second time. But his hands are tied here. He's not free to choose. God had made it impossible for him to keep all of his sons with him at home. Now, when what we know is too limited for us to make the proper decisions, God will help push us to make those, or make the decisions for us. He's going to push us in the right direction by circumstances, because the famine here was great. Jacob's family faced not just being hungry, but facing true starvation. And the sons of Jacob, they had no choice. That they didn't go, they were going to die. They had to go to Egypt again. Okay, so they see that, they see the importance of it, and they're telling Jacob, and they insisted that they had to take Benjamin with them, right? Because the last time they were there, didn't know who Joseph was, but Joseph was very adamant about making sure that the youngest brother, they're all there, and they're telling them Jacob doesn't want to release Benjamin here to see these first 7 verses, but they are insisting that the man here, Joseph, in Egypt, said that he wouldn't even entertain the fact they were there again in Egypt if Benjamin was not with them. And this obviously, was, the fact that it came, first of all, without Benjamin, probably upset Joseph in some way. And the fact that Joseph wanted to see Benjamin and was so adamant about it, it would upset Jacob, obviously, in some way. Probably questioning why in the world here that they would even tell the man in Egypt that they had a younger brother. But sons replied, we see in verses 1 through 7 again, they had no idea that the man would ask them to bring their brother next time they came to Egypt. Right? So, we see Jacob's reluctance here. He's not wanting to let Benjamin go, but his brothers are explaining to him that in order for him to even have an opportunity to see Joseph again, maybe get a little bit more corn, they've got to take him with him. All right, down to verse 8, Judah kind of steps in, and he reminds his father that, they had taken all the time they could possibly take. They had delayed as long as possible, but they had to get back to Egypt. Verse 8. And Judah said unto Israel's father, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. I will be surety from before him, of my hand shalt thou require him. If I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. For except we had lingered, surely now we have returned this second time. Okay, so Judah steps in, reminds his father that they have delayed his return as long as possible, and he was going to personally guarantee the absolute greatest, furthest amount of his ability. He was going to make sure that Benjamin returned to Canaan with him. Okay? For some reason that he didn't, some reason the man in Egypt kept Benjamin, it would be all on Judah's conscience and all his fault. Okay? So Jacob, what he does in verse 11, down to verse 14, is that he brings up a gift of some of the, delicacies, things that came to send to Joseph in Egypt, verse 11. And the father Israel said to them, if it must be so, now do this. Take the best fruits in the land in your vessels, and carry down the manna present, a little balm and a little honey spices, and myrrh and nuts and almonds. And take double money in your hand, in the money that was brought again in the mouth of your sacks, and carry it again in your hand, prepared to enter, it was an oversight. Take also your brother, and arise, and go unto the man. And God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that they may send away your other brother and Benjamin. If I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. Jacob orders up these small gifts of the delicacies of his land there in Canaan. Also orders to take the sons the money that was placed back into their sacks of corn the first time when they came back, where Joseph had that money put back in there. Take it, and then plus take some more money, and take his brother as well. And Jacob finally, reluctantly admits that he has to send his son. And what did Jacob admit here in his farewell to his sons? What was kind of, in verses 13 and 14, especially in verse 14 there, what did he kind of finally admit about, as he said, the farewell to his boys? The matter was ultimately where? And it's up to God, right? It's ultimately up to God. If he goes down there and none of the boys come back, nothing he can do about it. He's not going to be happy about it. It's going to bereave him. It's going to greatly affect him. But ultimately, the matter is in God's hands. If God so chose to take his boys, then there's literally nothing else he could do about it. Jacob there evokes, as we see in verse 14, he evokes El Shaddai. And El Shaddai, of course, means what? What's El Shaddai mean? It's kind of one of the more famous ones we've heard before. It's El Shaddai. You know? Okay, if you know about God. Almighty God, right? El Shaddai is Almighty God. The name for God is used oftentimes in where God is showing showing mercy here. We saw the name El Shaddai used in chapter 28, we saw it used in chapter 45. Essentially, leaving the matter in God's hands. That's what he's saying there in verse 14. And God Almighty give mercy before the man. It's El Shaddai. Okay? So the gifts, the boys sending Benjamin, all meant to help the situation here, all trying to convince the man, right? I think it's comical all through chapters 42 and 43 that over and over and over Joseph is just referred to as that man, or the man down there. It's amazing. We have no idea who he is. But all those things were sent to show as a peace offering, essentially. Like they don't mean any harm, just want help. And trying to ease the mind of that man down there in Egypt. Now, Jacob is not putting his faith in the fact that he's sending Benjamin. He's not putting his faith in the fact that he's sending the treats and delicacies down there. We saw verse 14. He is ultimately putting his faith in Almighty God here to make sure that everything works out as it should. We get to verse 15, and we see the boys show up there in Egypt, and they meet Joseph. And Joseph kind of continues here to give them some tests, continues to scrutinize his brothers in a couple of different ways. So let's just read down through, let's go 15 down through verse 25 first. Okay? And the men took that present, and they took double money in their hand and Benjamin, and rose up and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin was with him, he said to the ruler of his house, "Bring these men home, and slay, and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon." And the man did as Joseph bade. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house. And the men were afraid, because they were brought into Joseph's house. And they said, "Because of the money that was returned in our sacks. At the first time are we brought in, that he may seek occasion against us, and fall upon us, and take us for bondmen in our asses." And they came near to the steward of Joseph's house, and they communed with him at the door of the house, and said, "O sir, we come in deep down at the first time to buy food. And it came to pass, when we came to the inn, that we opened our sacks, and behold, every man's money was in the mouth of the sack, our money in full weight, and we have brought it again in our hand. And other money have we brought down into our hands to buy food. We cannot tell who put our money in our sacks." And he said, "Peace be to you, fear not, your God, and the God of your father hath given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money, and brought Simeon out unto them." And the man brought the men into Joseph's house, and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and gave their asses provender. And they made ready the present against Joseph, and they made ready the present against Joseph came at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there. So continuing here to test, scrutinize the brothers, kind of give them a hard time. Joseph brings them into the house, right? And this frightens them. They're worried that now this man has brought them into their home. And they're thinking that the reason that Joseph is bringing them into their house is what? Why are they concerned? Why are they worried about being brought into Joseph's house? What are they thinking? Yeah, going to be punished in some way because they technically didn't pay for their food, right? They gave Joseph the money, and then Joseph had the money placed back into their sacks. And they didn't realize it until they got back home. So they're concerned, thinking that, well, he's here to reprimand us or hurt us in some way for essentially taking free food from Egypt. And would Joseph have known that bringing them into his house would have caused them some worry? Yeah, he's doing this on purpose, right? He's doing this on purpose, dude. And he knows this is, he wants to see them squirm a little bit, right? And that's kind of what he's doing here. He's kind of just watching them squirm a little bit from a distance. So he's, the brothers here are worried that they're going to accuse them of stealing, corn. They're afraid they're going to confiscate the animals that they have as well, and eventually just turn them into slaves. So eagerly here they are explaining that they didn't mean to steal anything, right? It just, they don't know how it happened. The money showed back up. The person, though, that was in charge of Joseph's house tells them pretty quickly that there's no cause for alarm. Simeon shows back up. They bring him back in, restored to the brothers, and they're invited in to eat with Joseph, their brother. Right? Verse 26. Now Joseph enters into the house. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present, which was in their hand, into the house, and bowed themselves to him to the earth. And he asked them of their welfare. And he said, Your father well, the old man of whom you spake, is he yet alive? And they answered, The servant our father is in good health. He is yet alive. And they bowed down their heads and made obeisance. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, Is this your younger brother, of whom you spake unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother. And he sought where to weep. And he entered into his chamber there and wept. So now Joseph comes in, receives the gifts that the brothers have brought, and asks, Is your father well? And they tell him, Yes. Is this Benjamin? Yes. And now this ruse that Joseph has kind of had going for quite some time. Seeing Benjamin, realizing that his dad is okay, it kind of all the emotions begin to well up for Joseph. And we see him choked up with emotion, and obviously can't blow his cover yet, doesn't want to cry in front of his brothers. It kind of steps out and weeps as he moves hurriedly from the room, so he can kind of have his moment of emotion and probably try to compose himself as well. Right? So we see him getting choked up. He's happy to see Benjamin, happy to know his dad's still alive. Verse 31. He washed his face and went out and refrained himself and said, set on bread. So we see him getting himself composed, still not yet telling his brothers who he is. It says the time to eat. And they set on for him by himself, and for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians, which did eat with him by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with Hebrews. That is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they set before him the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled one at another. And he took and sent messes unto them before him. But Benjamin's mess was 5 times so much as any of theirs. And they drank and were merry with him. So at dinner here, Joseph is going to further test his brothers. They were astonished here to find themselves sitting according to their ages, right? So Joseph had the table set in such a way that when they came in, they would be sitting from the oldest to the youngest. Of course, I would imagine these guys walking into this dining area, walking into the fellowship hall, wherever it was, and seeing their names, essentially, assigned seat from the oldest to the youngest. How in the world do these Egyptians who don't know us know who's the oldest and who's the youngest? He's continuing to test them, continuing to think, I don't think he's just testing here. I think he's just pure teasing at this point, and kind of just giving him even more. They marvel at each other, looking around. You can imagine the bewilderment in their eyes when they realize what exactly is going on. In addition to that, Benjamin was served 5 times as much food as the rest of his brothers. Joseph knew what he was doing here, right? He knew how jealous the men had been when the father favored him, and he was wanting to see if they would feel the same way towards Benjamin in these same circumstances. All right, now we get to chapter 44, and the brothers return back to Egypt one more time. So Joseph tests his brothers further to discover here, if they would actually sacrifice Benjamin to save their own skins here, and therefore, of course, deeply wounding their father once again. So let's go first 13 verses here for chapter 44. And he commanded the steward of his house, saying, Fill the men's sack with food, as much as they can carry, and put every man's money in the sack's mouth. Then put my cup, the silver cup, in the sack's mouth of the youngest, and his corn money. And he did according to the word that Joseph had spoken. As soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away, they and their asses. When they were gone out of the city, and were not yet afar off, Joseph said to his steward, Up, follow after the men. When they thus overtake them, say unto them, Wherefore hath he rewarded evil for good? Is not this it in which my Lord drinketh, and whereby indeed he divineth, yet ye have done evil in so doing. And he overtook them, and spake unto them these same words. And they said unto him, Wherefore saith my Lord these words? God forbid that thy servants should do according to this thing. Behold, the money which was found in our sacks' mouths we brought again unto thee out of the land of Canaan. How then should we steal out of thy Lord's house silver or gold? With whomsoever of thy servants be found, both let him die, and he will also be my Lord's bondman. And he said, Now also let it be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be my servant, and ye shall be blameless. Then they speedily took down every man's sack to the ground, and opened every man's sack, and searched, and began at the eldest, and left at the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they rent their clothes, and laded every man his ass, and returned to the city. So we see the further test here. Joseph takes his silver cup and puts it into Benjamin's sack of corn, and tells his right-hand man, all right, this is what we did. Go out there and stop them and see if you can find us and bring back the one who has this cup. So he's testing them further, wanting to see just what they would do, see how far if they would be willing to hurt their father again in some way. So overtaken here by Joseph's steward, not far away from Egypt here, they tore their clothes in astonishment and absolute grief when they found out that the silver cup was in Benjamin's sack. They refused to accept the steward's offer to go free while Benjamin was detained, and we see them all heading right back to Egypt with Benjamin. The brothers here perceived, that they thought they were going to lose Benjamin to this man in Egypt after all. And we're going to make sure they were all there with him while this was going on. They weren't going to leave him there. Once again, we see these brothers having a very, very tunnel, limited perception on what was going on. Right? They're thinking now that God is actively working against them, right? Because they know the first time they didn't put the money in the bucket. They gave him the money. They gave him the money the second time. They know Benjamin didn't probably take the cup, right? But they're probably thinking that God is just continuing to work against them. And what actually he's trying to do here, of course, is work for them and show them here. So we see the test again, and now Judah's going to come in and plead for Benjamin's freedom. That runs all the way down through verse 8 of chapter 45. And we don't have time to read through all of it. I do want to read down through verse 17, though, of chapter 44. And see what Judah says here. And Judah and his brethren came to Joseph's house, for he was yet there, and they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said unto them, What deed is this that ye have done? Wot ye not that such a man as I can certainly divine? And Judah said, What shall we say unto my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? God hath found out the iniquity of thy servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we, he and he also with whom the cup is found. And he said, God forbid that I should do so, but the man in whose hand the cup is found, he shall be my servant. And as for you, get you up in peace unto your father. So Joseph here, verses 14 through 17, is offering freedom to the rest of these brothers, with the exception of Benjamin. Judah steps up and makes this passionate plea for Benjamin's release. Now, why do you think Judah was so quick to step in and offer up this plea for Benjamin's life? Why is he the brother that's so open and quick to do this? What had Judah told his father? He would be personally responsible for anything that happened to Benjamin here, right? So he steps up and is, trying to plead here for Benjamin. Judah reminded him, even though that they had told him that their father would die if he lost Benjamin. So with great reluctance here, because of that, their father had allowed Benjamin to come with them, lamenting that the two sons that Rachel had given him, one was dead here, torn by wild beasts. How could he possibly give up the other? And we won't read down all the way down through verse 34, but In verse, let thy servant abide instead of the lad, a bondman to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren. For how shall I go up to my father, and the lad not be with me? Lest peradventure I shall see the evil that shall come from my father. That was in verse 34, right? It's what we see in verse 34 there, chapter 44. That's what Judah says there to Joseph. Again, how shall I go to my father and my brother, this lad, not be with me? Peradventure I see the evil that shall come unto my father. So up to this point now, we kind of see these guys are in full-on desperation mode. How much had these brothers changed from the day now that they had taken Joseph, sold him into slavery, it's in chapter 37, to now them standing before Joseph several years later? How much change had the brothers gone through? A lot, right? They had started off with, how much concern did they have for the life of Joseph? A lack of, right? None whatsoever. How much concern do they have for Benjamin's life right now? A lot, right? We see him a lot. So we see this huge change. A complete lack of concern in Joseph's life, to they would literally do anything it takes to make sure that Benjamin doesn't have to be a slave, doesn't have to die, right? They are not going to just run off and leave Benjamin to fend for himself. They are going to do whatever is possible. So he's got his brothers here, right? They are, this is good Southwest Virginia talk, just absolute fit to be tied, right? They are to the rope's end. They don't know what they can possibly do. I'm sure they're talking amongst themselves, thinking, "Oh my goodness, this is going to kill Dad. He's not going to withstand this." So we get to chapter 45, and we see now that Joseph can no longer restrain himself. Judah's plea and the emotion with which Judah probably has talked about keeping Benjamin. The way these guys probably are looking at him with just absolute deer in the headlight looks on their eyes, it has unhinged his self-control. Verse 1 of chapter 45, "And Joseph could not refrain himself before all of them that stood by him, and he cried, caused every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brothers. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard." So Joseph couldn't keep himself composed anymore. He sent everybody out, and he wept so loudly that everybody pretty much heard him, right? Even Pharaoh and the Egyptians, everybody heard him cry as he reveals his identity. Verse 3, "And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence." Okay, so now let's forget about Joseph for just a second, and let's go to the perspective of his brothers. Okay, and let's start with Judah. All right, Judah has just gone on this rant about he will literally do anything he can possibly do to make sure that Benjamin doesn't die. We know that all the things that they have happened to him, they're in a completely foreign place. They're all worried he's going to end up dead. They're at their wits' end here. They're in total and complete panic mode. And now Judah has seen a ghost. Right? That's what's happened. He's now seen a ghost. This guy walks up to them, the guy that's the cause of all this controversy and all this problem, and he probably takes off his headdress or whatever he has on, and looks at Judah and says, "Hey, it's me, your brother, Joseph." And now Judah has seen a ghost. And the rest of these guys are probably trying to process what is going on. Because in their minds, there's no way this man from Egypt should know the name Joseph. He shouldn't. That would be weird for him to say that. An Egyptian man to say a Hebrew name would be very, very strange. So you can imagine kind of what's going through the mind here of Judah and Simeon and all these guys, right? It's probably a pretty amazing event to kind of be able to kind of be off fly on the wall and be able to see. In his brethren, we see, right in verse 3, we see the response. And his brethren couldn't do what? Talk, right? Judah's just seen a ghost, he couldn't talk. He couldn't even answer it in any way whatsoever. Because they were troubled at his presence. Verse 4, and Joseph said to his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph, your brother. So he's having to explain to them again. They just don't get it. Whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved nor angry with yourself that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land. And yet there are 5 years in which there shall be neither earing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and a lord of his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Haste ye, and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not. And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast. And there I will nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty. And behold your eyes to see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that is my mouth that speaketh unto you. And ye shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that ye have seen, and all the haste to bring down my father thither. And he fell upon his brother's Benjamin's neck and wept. And Benjamin wept upon his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brethren and wept unto them. And after that, his brethren talked with him. And the fame thereof was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brethren are come. And it pleased Pharaoh well and his servants. All right, so we see Joseph, finally the bigger deal here, right? Joseph can't refrain himself anymore. He tells them who he is. Speechless and afraid, the brothers thought their lives are in jeopardy here. Would Joseph take the opportunity here to avenge the fact that they sold him into slavery? Of course, Joseph would not. He had thoroughly tested his brothers and found that they had changed. They were obviously very sorry for what they had done to him, and they had demonstrated great concern and tender love for both Benjamin and their father. Joseph tells them, come here. He hugs them and kisses them and explains to them that they didn't sell him into slavery. God placed him into Egypt, right? So that he would be able to be in a position to save them. So we see absolutely no remorse at all, or no ill will at all of Joseph here towards his brothers. And we see once again why, back when Joseph had that coat of many colors on, and he was 12 years old, and God revealed to him that the sheaves of barley been bowing down, and the stars bowing down. We see why God picked Joseph and not Judah or Simeon or Benjamin or anybody else, right? Because only Joseph would have had the wherewithal to say, you guys didn't sell me into slavery when I was 13. God placed me into Egypt so that you all came down here 25 years later, I can make sure the family was taken care of. That's just a really, really cool kind of full circle thing to see with the life of Joseph, is how he was able to, and again, we mentioned this, Joseph had ample opportunity to blame and be upset with God, right? As he had these terrible situations on numerous occasions happen to him. But Joseph always had his down days, of course, as anybody would, but always remained faithful to the fact that God had given him something in particular and placed him in a very, very specific thing. All right, last point here is now we see Jacob's trip down to Egypt. Now, this is a pretty big deal, right? Because 5 more years of famine, and it's not just Jacob, like it's coming to spend time in Goshen, right? It's everybody's coming down, right? Everybody's going to come down, and now going to be able to enjoy the fact that Joseph has been placed in this position to take care of all of the Hebrews, right? All of the Israelites here, and you know this is a major shift in the story of the Hebrew people. Is when they get to Goshen, because they get to Goshen now, and we know they're allowed there under this Pharaoh, they are allowed to be fruitful and multiply, right? And they become this great, or beginning to become this great number of people. And the Pharaoh are glad that they're there. They coexist with the Egyptians, and they have their own little land that they stay in, and their flocks get bigger, and everything kind of gets greater, and it's all because of this move of Jacob from Canaan to Egypt. All right, now, it talks about it all through chapters 45, 46, and 47. I have 7 minutes left. We don't have time to read through all of this chapter. But I do want to bring out a couple of things, okay? In verses 14 and 15 of chapter 45, if you look there, let's go to verse 25. Let's go to verse 25, chapter 45, sorry. And they went up out of Egypt and into the land of Canaan of Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and his governor over all the land. And Jacob's heart fainted, right? And for he believed him not. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said unto them. And when he saw the wagon which Joseph sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. And Israel said, It is enough, Joseph my son is yet alive, I will go and see him before I die. So we see the brothers showing back up, telling Jacob everything that happens, and he's pretty much passes out, doesn't believe him. But once he sees the stuff that Joseph has sent up for them, he sees that and he wants to go down and see his long lost son before he dies. Over in verse 29 and 30 of chapter 46, we see finally Jacob seeing Joseph after all this time. So if you go to verse 40, chapter 46 and 29, and Joseph made ready chariots and went up to meet Israel his father to Goshen, and presented himself unto him, and fell on his neck and wept on his neck for a good while. And Israel said to Joseph, Now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive. And Joseph said to his brethren and unto his father's house, I will go up and show Pharaoh, and say unto him, My brethren and my father's house, which are from the land of Canaan, are come unto me. So, long last, Joseph finally sees his father. Though the arms around the necks, obviously, Jacob declares now he can die because he's seen his face. Perhaps the contentment prolonged his life, and he lives another 17 years there in Goshen. Both Jacob and Joseph spent their final days in Egypt, but it wasn't the final resting place for either of them. Jacob requested that he be buried in the land of Canaan, in the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham and Sarah were buried. All right, and that's over in chapter 49, verses 29 through 33. I don't have time to go over there, but he wants to be buried back where Abraham and Sarah are. Joseph insisted that his bones be carried from Egypt and be buried in Canaan when the time of the Exodus came. He said to his brothers, God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land unto the land which we swear to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. If you will flip over to chapter 50 with me. And look at verse 24. We're going to finish up there and here. And Joseph said to his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of the land, unto the land which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin into Egypt. So we end up the end of the book of Genesis here with Joseph is dead, his bones are still in Egypt, but he's pretty much made these people promising him that when they leave, so the Exodus is coming, right? Because we know that the Israelites is the land of Egypt promised to them. No, the land of Canaan is promised to them, right? And Joseph knows that, so he knows that at some point, people who are living in Goshen, who are all Israelites, or all people from Jacob, are going to be leaving at some time. And he wanted to make sure that when they leave, they take his bones with them. All right, so that finishes up the book of Genesis for us. Okay? God's plans are always good because He orders them according to His perfect nature and for the accomplishment of His perfect will. And no greater story depicts that than the story of Joseph. And it's one of my favorite stories, and just to see the whole plan in the 25, 30 years it took place, all the different pieces of the plan, how the focal point though was always Joseph's faith in God, and how God placed him in this position so that he could get the Israelites out of Canaan while the famine was going on, and have them taken care of in Goshen, and allow them to kind of multiply there. And then, of course, we know Exodus shows up. The good Pharaoh is no longer around. Now the bad Pharaoh shows up, and he doesn't like these Israelites and turns them into slaves and all the stuff that happens in Exodus, which we'll start looking at next week. Okay, so next week we're going to start the book of Exodus. So if you want to go ahead and read the first couple of chapters of it, I've not looked at the book of Exodus in quite some time. There's lots of good stories there that we need to see there. Looking at Moses and all the stuff that happens, the cool things, the plagues and stuff that happen in the book of Exodus. So that's where we're going to start next week. So if you want to start kind of reading through that, please, by all means, do so. All right, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the lesson of Joseph. Thank you for what he was able to do, what you were able to do through him, and the faithfulness that he had with us. Thank you so much for the fact that we're able to see this story, to see this event, and how you remain faithful to those who are faithful to you. It's a reminder for us. Pray for Pastor Rob as he comes in the next few minutes as well. Would you see him in a mighty